Okay, so hair mineral analysis, it's not a new test. It's been going on even before the 1950s, during the time where people were doing a lot of mining. There were a lot of like industrial metal workers. They were using hair to look for heavy metal. And then in the 1960s to the 1970s, they developed some more precise technologies. And one of them is called ICP. It's a inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. So basically, it's a tool that can not only look at metals, but it could also look at minerals. And minerals were smaller, like trace minerals. So this became very interesting. And in the 60s to the 70s, people started looking at minerals and how that affected people's health. So it really was the 60s and 70s where they really got into even knowing what trace minerals were and the impact that it had on human health. But then it was only until the 1980s to the 1990s that it got into alternative medicine and into like the naturopaths started using it and holistic nutritionists started using it. And one of the older companies is based in the US. They're called Trace Elements. I actually have their book right here. If you're interested, you can order it from their website to learn more about minerals. And they've been around from 1984. They were there for a long time and they have a lot of information on this. But I'm working with a company based in Ontario. Oh, Sally Tam's entering. Oh yeah, I have a few people that just joined. Zita and Alexandra is going to be joining too. So yeah, feel free to ask questions. I was just going through the history of this hair mineral analysis to demonstrate that it's not just a new thing. Basically, when you do a hair mineral analysis, you're taking a sample of your hair and you're taking about an inch to an inch and a half very close to your scalp, right? So it's close to your skin, and it shows what is coming out of your hair in the last 3 or 4 months. The report that it gives will show toxic metals, so what shouldn't be in your body, and it should also show the minerals, the healthy minerals, and if there's any imbalances. And I'm going to go through some case examples so you understand how to detect imbalances and what that actually means. Okay, so Dora's joining too. I never know how long to wait because I don't want to waste anyone's time, but we're 8 minutes into it. And basically, I'm just showing here, for those of you who just joined, the type of metals and minerals that you'll be seeing on a hair mineral test. So why is the hair different than a blood test? So it's often compared to taking a video recording, which is what you will see from your hair, versus a photo, which is a snapshot in time, what you're going to see in your blood. And the reason is because a hair sample, about an inch, long and about a tablespoon amount, will give you an idea of what's going on in the last 3 to 4 months. So it's like watching a video. You see a little bit of a bigger picture of movement, a trend, for example. But blood tests, it's very much a short-term snapshot. So if you ate, let's say, bananas in the morning, you might have more potassium. If you, for example, were in traffic that morning or you had a fight with your partner and you just have like high cortisol, your adrenals are going, you also might have different kinds of reactions in the body, high cortisol. So, for example, if you have heavy metals, that usually leaves the blood and the urine pretty quickly, but it gets stored in the tissues. And the reason is because your body wants to keep the blood clean as it can possibly be, just to protect, the organ. So it will choose to put it in tissues that are non-essential. So it'll put it in your hair, it'll put it in your nails. And if you're, let's say, lacking iron or lacking protein or, you may see that sooner in the hair than in the blood. And I'm going to go through some examples. So yeah, blood is a transport medium, which measures what's transported, in that specific time that you're taking the blood. It's kept clean for transport, and heavy metals are stored in soft tissues to protect your body. The body removes lead, for example, from the serum and deposits it into tissues such as the liver, the bones, the teeth, and your hair. Calcium, for example, if you lose calcium, even in cases that are very advanced in osteoporosis, you could still see, like decent levels of calcium in a blood test, even because you're actually, the blood is still trying to carry that same amount of calcium and leaking it from the bones. So, for example, symptoms of iron deficiency, you can see that in the hair before you can see it in the blood. Again, because of the same reason, it's non-essential. So it will actually not put it in as much. People start losing their hair, when they have less iron, less protein. And that's just because your body is trying to, grab onto all these essential nutrients for your organs, right? So it'll let that go. So you'll see a depletion there, and that's your first sign before you see it in your blood. So how do you take a hair sample? So first of all, we want clean hair that hasn't been dyed for, let's say, 3 weeks. But I've spoken to the technicians, and that's just a general guideline. Even if you haven't dyed it in a week or two, that's still okay, because they can recognize what chemicals are the dye and what are actually minerals that are supposed to be in the hair. So, but still, just to avoid any contamination, it's best to not dye your hair or have it treated. And also, you're going to take a small sample that's close to your scalp. So this over here, can everybody see this right hand picture with the ruler?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually my hair. And I take a ruler and you measure like an inch and a half. And I took it from 2 different parts, but you could take it from 3 different parts, the left, the right, and the center, and the back of the head. So you can put your hair up like this and then just trim a couple of spots. And then you cut out like about an inch, enough to fill up a tablespoon. And then you put it in an envelope. And make sure, you don't have any anti-dandruff shampoo that morning, because then the zinc and the selenium will show up more. And just make sure you cut the hair from multiple spots. So there is sort of like multiple samples, and make sure your scissors are not rusty. Does anybody have any questions so far about the test itself and what is
No,
expected as a
no,
sample?
it sounds so looks pretty like easy to do.
Yeah, it's very easy to do. And even if you, let's say for some men, they don't have a lot of hair, you can use nails as well. And on the form, they will actually have a spot for you to check off nails or hair.
Okay.
Okay, so when you get the report, there's 3 sections to the report. The first section is about heavy metals like mercury, aluminum, lead. And then the second section is about minerals like magnesium, potassium, calcium. And then you have the bottom, which is the ratio. And this is the part that I find is probably the most important part, because it shows imbalances, and it can also show your metabolic rate. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So the heavy metals. So first off, heavy metals, I think most people have some amount in that top part here. Even if you see green, no heavy metal should be in our body. Technically speaking, there's no real safe amount. But when it's green, it just means that most people have it. So it's like the average. Here, barium is extremely high, and I've seen cases where, aluminum and lead are higher. And basically, these kind of metals, they come from mainly pollution, from the coal, burning of the coals, in plants that make batteries, also from paint. So there's cadmium in ceramic paints, in tobacco. Mercury is found in seafood, in certain seafood. So I put some examples. Lead, for example, in old homes, you have lead in the paint, but you can also get it if you have lead pipes. And if you drink tap water and you haven't filtered it out, you can get lead from there. And then aluminum is super, super common. I would say aluminum is probably the most that I've seen as, like the staple metal that shows up, because aluminum is used in cookware, pots and pans and baking trays, aluminum foil. Oftentimes when you have canned goods, it's aluminum cans, soda cans. And aluminum is also in the air, like from the pollution, there's a certain element of aluminum. So it's very common to see that. Okay, so here's where it gets a little long, because I just put all the sources. So if ever you do the test and you see aluminum show up, the first thing is to ask yourself, what are the sources that I'm exposed to? That's aluminum. So you can just check it off. Make sure you reduce that. So change the aluminum foil to parchment paper. A lot of non-stick pans if you scratch it, it's aluminum, so that can get into the food. So you can switch your pans. Some lipsticks have aluminum and some foundations have it. So you can go through that list, even antacids. Sometimes they have aluminum hydroxide, even aspirin. Some of them are buffer to protect the stomach, and that contains aluminum compounds. Vaccines have aluminum as an adjuvant. Baking powders, processed cheese. This is something I learned. Like, how many of you know that there's aluminum in the processing of cheese? They actually use sodium aluminum phosphate to emulsify and to make the texture softer and a certain bounce to the cheese. So this is something I learned that was new. Anti-caking agents in salt and tap water, they a lot of times have different heavy metals. So it's really important for you to filter this out. The health concern for excessive aluminum is, and all metals really, is brain and neurological problems. And especially aluminum is linked to Alzheimer's disease, even autism. They have done autopsies on the brain of autistic children, Alzheimer's patients, and they've seen high levels of aluminum in the brain tissue. Also, your bone can suffer, the calcium absorption can suffer if you have too much aluminum. Then there's mercury. Mercury, something that I actually have experience with because I had mercury fillings and my son had mercury fillings. A lot of children in Quebec have mercury fillings who are under 10 because it's covered by RAMQ. I don't know if they've changed it now, but I so regret that I put my son through that. But when he was 4 years old, went to the dentist. He had lots of cavities, and I was scared because the dentist literally made me really afraid that he was going to be in major pain. He'd keep me up all night because the cavities were so bad. So he had a mouthful of fillings, and he ended up getting a lot of migraines. And I still think to this day, there's certain elements in there that, because this heavy metal doesn't just go away overnight, it takes a long time. In fact, it could take a generation. Decades. So, I mean, you have to actively work to detox and chelate the heavy metals, and it takes time. So even, for example, a mother who has high copper, let's say a mother took birth control pills or had a copper IUD, they have higher levels of copper in their body, and then they quit, they stop, and they want to get pregnant. Even if they had a few months to a year off of the copper, it could still be high in their tissue. And so they can pass this on to their child, and their child could be high in copper. And I've seen the hair mineral analysis for mother and child. And that's where I'm like, how come the daughter has high copper? She's so young, and the mother has high copper. Where is this coming from? So yeah, you can see patterns that affect the child, and you can trace it back to certain toxicities that have occurred. So it's really a good way to kind of understand the reasoning behind certain toxicities. So yeah, mercury, again, it's in seafood, but it's also in electric equipment. It's in amalgam fillings. It's in vaccines, although they've removed some already in the thimerosal. So, I mean, these are things that you can consider when you see, okay, I may have high mercury. Where is that coming from? Lead, for example, the lead pipes. Again, I don't know if you've heard, Montreal had a lot of lead pipes, and I don't know if they've removed them all, but a few years ago, it was on the news, and I had relatives who got a letter from the government, and they said, you need to talk to if you're the owner, change the pipes in the house, because we're only responsible to change the pipes in the streets. So the ones inside the building, you have to ask your landlord, or you, if you're the owner, you have to take care of that. So for my aunt, she got the letter, and I don't even know if she changed it, but we got her a filter that filtered out lead. So yeah, lead pipes are still in Montreal, especially in older homes, like those that are built in the 1980s, like Ville Saint Laurent, for example, the old Ville Saint Laurent, NDG, for example, they would have it east of Montreal. They'd have some of that lead pipes too inside the homes. So that's just something to look at. And also construction workers could be exposed from, paint. There's still some paint that has lead depending on what work they do. So all of this is really going to show up on your test, and I can go on about every single one, but I, I basically don't want to bore you. But yeah, high copper is also very prominent in women, especially if they were on birth control or if they've had copper IUD. But sometimes it's also a matter of whether your liver can detox it. And I've seen one case where the person had high copper, and I found out that she was using a copper tongue scraper for months. Now that could have been a source of copper, but at the same time, she had some liver limitations. So that both of those causes could equal a high copper reading. So whenever you have someone who has a reading with high copper, of course you have to go through the list, right? So you say, okay, are you wearing jewelry that's touching your skin that has copper? Do you have copper pipes? And then you can take certain actions. You can take high levels of vitamin C, more than 1,500 milligrams a day, to help with copper elimination. There's liver support supplements. There's zeolite, which is a mineral that can capture copper as well as other heavy metals. So there's ways that you can kind of detox. Barium is another one. It shows up, especially for people who've done any x-rays on their GI tract. Like, you drink that liquid. If you've had x-rays for your stomach or intestines, that has some barium in it. If you live close to any coal burning power plants, mining plants, or anywhere that makes batteries, they have barium in the batteries. So all to say that heavy metals is a big concern because it does interfere with the brain and the nervous system, and it also interferes with the other minerals. So I like to think of heavy metals as sort of the bullies, and one example I like to give is lead, for example. If you have very low calcium, then your body will actually put the lead in your bone because it's similar. So it'll actually take the lead and keep it in the bones. But if you have enough calcium, it'll actually be able to replace that. If your body doesn't have enough calcium, it's going to search for other similar types of, molecules, and it'll take the lead and place it into the bone. So that's something that I was aware of many years ago when anyone familiar with Suzanne Summers. So she actually talked about that. She said that this is the reason why when people get older and they break their hip or they fracture a bone, they can get very sick for a period of time because there's these toxic metals that actually leach out. So it's something to be aware of. If it does show up in the hair, there's ways that we can actually remove it, and then you can test after 3 to 6 months to see if the metals have subsided. And sometimes there's a peak of heavy metals in the hair as you detox. Like if you go to the sauna, an infrared sauna, that could kind of dislodge some of this heavy metals from the organs, and it will show up more in the hair. So there is a trend of that. But that would be a good sign if you were trying to detox. You will see that kind of surge, and eventually you won't find as much in the hair. So I'm going to go to the section where I said earlier was very important as part of the test. So let me just show you a couple of examples of a test. Can everybody see my screen here? Okay, this is probably really small. So here are some examples of tests of clients. And I took their names off, so it's anonymous. But so here you have the metals, you have the minerals, and then on the bottom you have significant ratios. And this is the part that is very important because it shows you the dynamics of these minerals and what does that mean. So for example, calcium to potassium. The calcium to potassium ratio, if it's really high, it means that the thyroid is sluggish. So it's a thyroid ratio. So if I look in here as my case study, calcium to potassium is extremely high. So it's supposed to be from 2 to 40, and it's like 530 practically. Now I know this person, and usually you have to talk to the person too, like not just looking at the picture, but I know for a fact this person had gone through a very traumatic time. She was extremely stressed. So this makes sense to me that her thyroid would be a little bit sluggish, will need some support. Then the other ratio you want to look at is the sodium to magnesium ratio. So here it's NAMG, sodium to magnesium. So I want to go back to this case study. So if you look down here, it's sodium to magnesium ratio. So it's a little bit on the low end, and that's an adrenal ratio. So usually we look at, this is what we look at, to kind of understand more of the balance of the body. Sodium to potassium, which is right here. This is what they call the vitality ratio. So it's because sodium and potassium is what allows your cells to interchange fluids, the sodium potassium pump. So if you want to detox or if you want to get nutrition into the cells, the exchange has to work. Otherwise, it's not going to get any nutrition. Like if it's calcified, if it's too much calcium and not enough of the sodium potassium ratio, then it's like calcification. So you're not really getting that nutrient in. So this is called the vitality ratio. And if it's below 2.5, then it indicates lower vitality, chronic stress. The person might be very frustrated, resentful, very negative. And when it's above 6 or 7, it indicates high stress, inflammation, anger. So this is actually a very important ratio. And if I go back to, let's say this case over here, the sodium to potassium is 6.4. So it's really high. So it just shows, it just gives you an idea of what that person's going through. They're stressed. They have a sluggish thyroid. They're probably having trouble sleeping. And that was the case. So anybody have questions so far? Okay, so one thing that I typically get asked is iron. So somebody might look at their file and say, oh, I'm surprised that my iron is okay. I always thought I had low iron. So what I look at here, again, going back to the ratio, if your calcium is really high, your calcium to iron, that's this one, Ca to Fe, if that ratio is really high, it could mean that calcium is higher than iron. It indicates poor utilization of iron, poor absorption. High calcium intake, especially if they have supplements also, can block iron absorption in the gut. Conditions like low stomach acid, leaky gut, celiac disease can impair the absorption of iron. So it could show up there, but it doesn't mean that you're utilizing it because your calcium is so high, or it doesn't mean that you're actually absorbing it properly. So then what do you do to address the issues? You will help them with low stomach acid. You're going to most likely, and I say you're going to help them, but you're going to help yourself if you get this reading. But if you're a practitioner, you would want to support the low stomach acid issue because you need acid to break down these minerals. And especially with iron, you need enough acid. That's why they always couple it with vitamin C when you get a supplement with iron. So also you can incorporate probiotics, digestive enzymes. So you want to help them with digestion. So basically when you see something like this, very high in calcium, low in iron, that's an indicator that they need a little bit more stomach acid and more help with their absorption. Does anybody have questions here?
No.
Okay, so when you see, so basically when you get the reading back, there's something called a metabolic response or metabolic profile. If somebody has high calcium, high magnesium, and then very low sodium potassium, they're usually considered as a slow oxidizer. So oxidation or metabolism is how well you, or how quickly you convert food to energy. So if you convert it really slowly, that means you're a slow oxidizer. If you're a fast oxidizer, this is how the graph will look from your hair mineral test. You're going to have low calcium and magnesium and high sodium potassium. So this is something that I would look in that little square in that section. A slow oxidizer is somebody, when we like to compare it to a car, let's say, is like a slow to generate energy. So it's like low RPM, very slow. The fast oxidizer is like somebody who's just high RPM, but easily worn out. Okay, I don't know if you know anybody like that. Like they're always on the go, but they can burn out. And either way, you're losing energy. So you want to be kind of balance them back to the middle. Somebody who's a slow oxidizer. Now, I don't know if you can identify with, one of these. I mean, it could be that you're somewhere in the middle, but it will tell you a little bit more about the person. If you see that they have high calcium, magnesium, and very low sodium, potassium, they're a slow oxidizer, which means they have one or less bowel movements a day, usually constipated or just slow in their bowel movement. They might have dry skin, dry hair, cold hands and feet. They might have a little bit slightly lower blood pressure, brain fog, lethargy. And someone who's a fast oxidizer is somebody who has maybe 2 bowel movements a day, usually oily skin, higher body temperature, someone who can sweat easily. Their weight gain is more in the abdomen because they have higher cortisol. And cortisol ratios are also dependent on potassium ratios. So that's why as a fast oxidizer, they have high sodium, potassium, and low calcium, magnesium, right? So the fact that they have high potassium also contributes to the cortisol, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, irritable, and nervous. So this is the difference between those two profiles. And based on that, you can know what to eat, how to balance yourself. If you're someone who's a slow oxidizer, that means most likely because of the high calcium, magnesium, that's shown in the hair, most likely you do need a bit of support with your adrenals and your thyroid. You might have trouble retaining some sodium and potassium. Therefore, like you could see that in the graph. Magnesium might not be as available to the body. So a person like that, you would want them to maybe have less fatty foods and more protein. You'll increase their lean protein. And I see a lot of people who are slow oxidizers that would want to eat mostly plant-based because they have trouble digesting meat. So they kind of lose the appetite to actually eat meat because it's so much easier for them to have more vegetables and complex carbs. So this is just something, you can tell when the calcium potassium ratio is very high, that person's a slow oxidizer. So these are just very interesting ways for you to read the test and kind of understand yourself and how to support your own metabolic rate. Someone who's a fast oxidizer would be someone who would want some more fat. You'd add some butter and olive oil to kind of, because fat slows down the metabolism a little bit. So somebody who's a fast oxidizer, you can add that in to kind of help them to balance out their metabolism, maybe organ meats, avoid sugar, maybe focus a little bit more on high calcium foods, maybe, like high magnesium foods to calm their nervous system. Fast oxidizers, if they don't get enough fat in the diet, they will crave carbs. And usually you can tell with the calcium phosphorus or calcium phosphorus ratio that would indicate a fast oxidizer. So anyway, this is all pretty technical, but just to say that there are some key things to look at. And one of the very common ones that I've seen is 4 lows. They call it the 4 lows, which means all of those 4 minerals, the magnesium, calcium, potassium, sodium, they're all low. And when that happens, the person's pretty much in burnout. They're nutritionally depleted, adrenals are exhausted, and it's like chronic stress. Basically, they're spinning their wheels in a ditch kind of thing. They're just going nowhere. They're fatigued. They might have allergies. They might experience allergies because their immune system is compromised. And so that kind of profile, if you see that, you would really want to focus on rest. You want to sleep 9 hours or more a day, add some naps in there. You want to rest your adrenal glands. Take magnesium bath, maybe add baking soda in the bath, some sea salt, like they sell dead sea salt from the Dead Sea on Amazon, so that you can really enhance your minerals by soaking in the bath of minerals. And for this month, I'm offering the hair mineral analysis test for 15% off. So if you go on my website, you can enter the promo code November 15. And basically, if you want a consultation, that's separate. If you want to just do it yourself, that's okay as well, from what I've been telling you. And if you want my help to design a nutrition plan, I'm more than happy to do that. And I offer insurance receipts. And apart from that, do you have any questions on the hair mineral analysis?
Hi. No, I found this so interesting and that we can give our nails as well if like we don't want to cut our hair.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting. And then after we get the analysis back, we can book an appointment with you, I imagine, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes about 2 weeks, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, because it's in Ontario. So once the lab gets it, they say usually 1 to 2 weeks, and then I'll get the email, and then I can send it to you, and we can review it together. And then based on what I see, I can then send you some supplement recommendations. And usually it takes a few months. So it's like because usually, let's say, for example, I notice, for example, I'm just going to show you another case study of this particular person here. So this one, for example, is someone who has high strontium, high calcium, high magnesium. And strontium is something it's a trace mineral that's in your bones, and it actually comes out into the blood when there's bone remodeling going on. So if there's movement in the bone. And so for me, when I see strontium high with calcium and magnesium, it's bone loss. It's basically bone loss. And I typically would ask the question, like, do you supplement on calcium, magnesium? And if that person says no, then where's that magnesium coming from? Because it really should be in the bones. It shouldn't show up high quantity in your hair. So there's actually some kind of bone loss. And so the first thing I do is not to supplement on calcium because they're not able to absorb it. So if I supplement with calcium, they're going to end up with more bone, more calcium in their tissue, which means kidney stones can happen, calcification in their heart tissues can happen, and that's not good. So just because you see something really high, it doesn't mean that, you're fine either, that there's plenty of, your bones are fine, right? So like reading it is very important. So the first thing I would do would help with their digestion so that they can absorb the calcium, maybe add K2. Vitamin K2 can bring the calcium back into the bones. So that's the first level. And you don't want to detox too quickly if you have heavy metals either, because there's such a thing called dumping. So like if you have high barium, you can have a barium dump situation where you get so much toxicity at once. So you want to gradually support the colon, make sure the person's having regular bowel movements, support the liver, and then you can add in certain things to chelate and to get the heavy metals out. So I would, in this case, probably the first month to 2 months, work on the digestion. And then, and with the vitamin K2, and then I would move into the barium to see, how do we, slowly remove that and add in selenium, supporting the thyroid. So that comes in phases. So does that answer your question about consultation? And usually it's an hour, and then after I send a report, after the consultation, I'll customize it. And the report usually has the food, dietary changes, as well as supplementation. Thank you, Zita. That's a good question. Okay, so I just wanted to mention.
I have a question, Cindy.
Hey,
Hi.
Dora.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm just wondering, like, if let's say we do the mineral test now
Mhm.
and we work on changes and whatever, what would be the ideal time to retest ourselves to see if there's actual improvement or actual differences?
It's three
Like, how
months.
long should we wait?
3 months is the ideal time.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I just wanted to take some time to talk about another test because we have a few people who had asked me about this because I had just sent a newsletter out. This happens only once a year. The lab only does this once a year, and it's a limited supply. So it's half off of this test called the Nutrigenomix. And this is a DNA test. And there's 4 flavors. There's one for athletes. There's one for people who are into fertility. There's one for vegetarians or vegans. And then there's just regular health. And it basically is a saliva sample that they take. They have a little swab, and you just put your saliva on it. And once they get your saliva, they will then decode it, and there's 70 genes that it looks at. So basically, they will then have a report on how your body, how your DNA assimilates certain vitamins and minerals. So for example, my husband can drink 7 cups of coffee and he can sleep at night, no problem. But I can't. Like, 1 is my max. And this is because my own body, there's an enzyme that doesn't, it doesn't process the same way as his, right? So there's DNA that's, more disposed to dealing with certain things than others. And there's one that I think, is probably the most important gene. And this is the MTHFR gene. So this is how your body methylates. And it's the THFR is responsible for an enzyme that's really important for basically converting homocysteine to methionine. So this is like technical stuff, but it has to do with DNA repair, detoxification, neurotransmitter regulation. So B complex, for example, if you're somebody who doesn't have a way to, you're missing this gene or you're variant in this gene, then you can't actually take, you have all these health concerns. It's related to all of these health concerns, first of all. And you would be having trouble metabolizing folate, like vitamin B9. You would need a methylated version. You would have trouble with B12 unless it's methylated. So some of these people will have trouble detoxifying their body. They might have a stronger reaction to certain toxins. They might have migraines more often. They're more sensitive. And this is because they're missing this MTHFR gene. So if you know it, if that's part of your DNA and you know that, then you know that you need to support your liver more. Maybe you're going to supplement more on precursors to antioxidants that are in the liver, like NAC, for example. And I have clients who are missing this gene. And the problem is, if you don't know that you're missing it, you can take, when pregnant women, they take folic acid, because you need that for, the spine to be developed, the fetus, so they don't get this problem called spina bifida, where their nervous system in the spine is not contained properly. But if you don't have this particular gene, you won't be able to assimilate the folic acid. You would need a methylated version. So this is a huge, difference. If you didn't know that, then you could have folate deficiency. You can have anemia. You can have symptoms of anemia. So that's basically the test, the Nutrigenomix test. So that's half price. And then the final thing for Black Friday is that we have an online program between Alexandra and I. She focuses on Pilates and pelvic health, and I focus on the nutrition side. And basically it's all online, and it's lifetime access. You get 6 weeks where you're part of the Facebook group, but for life, but the actual program is 6 weeks. And you can repeat the 6 weeks. Every year you can do a reset. And during that time, we do multiple things like cutting out sugar, balancing your blood sugar. We talk about hormone balancing, and we even do intermittent fasting. And so like for this module, there's always 2 parts to the module. There's the exercise component and the nutrition component. And we have meal plans there. We have vegetarian meal plans as well. And the idea is that we want to turn the person from sugar burning to fat burning. So that's, this is where we all want to do that, because for hormone balancing, it's best to reduce sugar and to then train your body to burn fat. So that's really how we've designed it. And if you want private sessions, there's also a package, and it's all half price. And if you want the hair mineral test consultation, I could bundle it with this part as well, where the private sessions that I offer here can be applied to the hair mineral tests. So I'm going to send all of you this information because there's promo codes. And, if you have any questions, you can always email me. And I see Alexandra here. Hi there.
Thank you, Cindy. That was really useful. I was always wondering, what is this hair mineral test? And the DNA. The DNA thing, though, is a little bit scary.
Because you're giving your DNA to a lab?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to put your real name.
Oh,
You don't have to. They actually use just a number ID. So,
okay. That's
yeah.
good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you learn
And
something new about heavy metals? Do you have any questions about heavy metals?
uh, I want you to first not to feel bad about your son, because I know you probably feel heavy that it's because of that he has the headaches, but I want you to not feel that heaviness. But these days now, they are like my daughter, she's 9, and they offer these free fillers for cavities, and they are gray material. They're not actually metal anymore. Is that right? Am I right? Everyone, do you guys know?
I only know about the white composite. I don't really know about the gray one.
Yeah, okay, I need to look into that. But yeah, it's definitely a good point that you mentioned.
Well, for my son, he had so much mercury, silver, amalgams, and he had a couple of bridges because they had extracted some teeth. So we
Yes.
had like 3, 4 different types of metals, and I went to see a holistic dentist. For those who want to remove their mercury fillings, please see a holistic dentist because they're going to do it in a safe way. They have ways to ventilate. They'll actually put an oxygen mask on your nose so you're not like breathing back the vapors, the mercury vapors. And when I went there, he put a machine in my son's mouth to measure the electrical charge because with the saliva and the metals, he actually had a battery in his mouth. It was literally he was generating an electric current, and they put this machine. I was able to see the electric current, and he was basically telling me, what is this doing to his brain development? You think
Ooh.
having that electric current, right? So it's anyway, heavy metal is something that I think we all are exposed to, and the more that we're aware of the sources, the more we can reduce it, and then we can find a way to detox from it.
I think Zita has a question.
Yeah, if you don't mind, you have me thinking. I was in a car accident in 2014, and I have a 19-inch plate in my right arm. It's metal,
Okay.
and I've never liked the idea of having a foreign metal in my body. Obviously, I needed it to mend myself, but what do you think, or how do you think that impacts the heavy metals in the body? Because there's an actual piece of metal in me. And I remember once trying to do a detox, but I was informed not to because it was too fresh. Like I had just gotten the surgery. I'm curious about what that correlation would be, if there is one.
Yes, and it depends on what kind of metal
I
it is.
believe it's titanium.
Titanium. Okay. Because some metals are less, I guess, toxic in the body.
Right.
Like, even gold, for example, some types of silver is a little bit less harmful. I think that, I mean, if it's there and it's actually not really showing on the hair mineral test, like titanium, so it might not be a huge issue as long as it doesn't bother you. There's no other symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I know some people had dental implants and they use titanium. The only issue there is that sometimes if it's because we have a lot of 5G, we have like Wi-Fi, we have a lot of this EMF, electrical magnetic field, that could react
Right.
to some metal. So it's more harmful in the head. So it's like right there near your brain. But if it's in your arm, I don't really, and it doesn't cause any harm, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for this.
Yeah, no problem. Katerina.
Yes, Cindy, I just wanted to say thank you for the session. It was really interesting. And my question would be, you mentioned that, and I know that we have a lot of metals
Hmm.
from the vaccines. I mean, this is what they used to use there in vaccines, especially like for example, I didn't have a choice when I was in school, let's say 35 years ago. So I had those vaccines that were probably really heavy in metals. So for that, is there a way to actually detox from that?
Yeah, so the general detox protocol for mercury and aluminum, there's bentonite clay, there's zeolite, there's fulvic acid. Fulvic acid is really good for heavy metals. These are all different minerals also found in the soil. And then people use chlorella, vitamin C. So there's ways to do that, to chelate it, like cilantro. Like the health medium. What's that called? The person with the celery juice? Medical medium. He talks about that a lot too. The
Yeah,
heavy,
Anthony William.
yes, the heavy metal detox. But there's many ways that you can do that. Fulvic acid is probably fulvic acid and zeolite. It's one of my favorites. It's just liquid form, and you put it in your mouth. Take vitamin C with that, and then just reduce the sources of mercury and aluminum.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And your question about titanium, because it's not even in this test. So I will look into it, Zita, see if there's a better answer, and I'll let you know.
Perfect, thanks. And I'll also verify what the metal is because I'm assuming titanium, but I could also have forgotten at this point. So
Okay.
I'll circle back to you too.
Yeah, I'd love that because I knew somebody who had a hip transplant. Like there's some metal in the ball where they put the hip in.
Yeah.
And he had developed some mental issues like bipolar, like really severe bipolar.
I
And
keep hearing about that transfer. Absolutely.
yeah, and they actually had a class action lawsuit because the metal was leaking into his blood and it was really affecting his brain and his mental health. So, but then again, I don't remember what metal that was, so I have to look into it.
Okay. Thank you for this. I'll
You're
be
welcome.
connecting with you soon. I'm gonna get going now. Thank you all so much.
No problem. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
You
Let me know
too.
if you have any more questions, but my goal was to have this within the hour, so I'm glad I didn't go over.
Oh, it was great. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Bye.
info.
You
Bye.
too. Good
Bye,
night.
Dora. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Furnace.
Bye, Cindy. I
Bye.
loved it.
Awesome. Glad you did.
Bye, Cindy.
Bye,
My goodness.
Barty. Take
Have
care.
a good night.
You too. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Cindy. This was incredible.
You're welcome, Chris. Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me know if you need any help, any questions. I'm here.
Yeah, I actually do have one question.
Yeah.
Does it make a difference in between sending a hair versus a nail, or does not make a difference at all?
Okay, so they prefer hair.
Okay.
The lab says hair is more accurate.
Okay, good to
But
know.
yeah, nail is only if you have no hair or very little hair.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, I don't have that problem.
I know. You wouldn't notice it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
Okay, take care.
You too.
Bye.